Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where we are racing through 2022 with a different guest every day, talking about how technology is transforming our work, life, and even world. And today, I want to talk about democratizing data science and explore the world of predictive personalization. And after reading how Breinify raised an $11 million seed round last year to bring data science to the marketing team, I invited Diane Keng onto the podcast. And thankfully, she said yes, but I don't want to reveal any spoilers just yet. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Diane Keng is going to talk about data science, predictive personalization, temporal AI, and so much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Diane Keng. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Breinify, the leading predictive personalization at scale platform for consumer brands and retailers all around the world. And I'm super, super excited to get the opportunity to come today and just share some experiences and some stories.
I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into what you're doing at Breinify there. But before we do, I'm going to take you back before then. Can you share your origin story, where your passion for technology came from, and how that world of technology and personalization, etc., collided in some way to put you on this path you're on now?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty entrepreneurial growing up. I had started 3 different businesses by the time I was 18. And that's when I realized that I really wanted to be able to know how to build product and not be dependent on coming up with great ideas, but waiting for others to help me build. So I ended up studying computer engineering and math at Santa Clara University, and then got my first job working as one of the youngest algorithms engineer at Apple, where I worked day in, day out to process consumer behavior data. I then got the opportunity to lead Symantec's e-commerce engineering team, where I had to collaborate really closely with marketers that didn't necessarily come from a traditional data engineering background and be that bridge between 2 very different groups of people. And from both these places, one thing I picked up really quickly is that marketers are usually just not data scientists, and engineers really prefer working on product versus integrating marketing tools. So even when these 2 places I was at had a huge priority on consumer experiences from the leadership top down, tackling this at scale was just a huge obstacle and had a lot of different bottlenecks that were there. So that's how Breinify was born. We've always been a big believer in being able to democratize data science, essentially giving marketers the ability to have predictive capabilities without an in-house data science team.
Excellent. And before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little bit of research on you and Breinify. And one of the things I came across was your mission statement, in which you talk about democratizing data science. I mean, can you elaborate and possibly explain on how that can be achieved?
Yeah, most definitely. Believe it or not, 80% of the world's consumer brands lack data science to power their personalization. So if you think about how many data scientists are available in the world, and you gave these individuals a chance to work either at Google or another big tech company, or somewhere that sells chocolate or salad dressing, pretty sure you can kind of guess where they're going to pick. And so they tend to get scooped up by these different kind of big tech companies. So when you think about the brands that are in your kitchen pantry or your bathroom cabinet, those type of brands are going to have a really hard time being able to work with data in a meaningful and impactful way. And it can be really difficult to even get started, but it's a really common conundrum for brands like all around the world. And especially with today, we're seeing a huge shift in the world regarding consumer expectations, especially with the pandemic, right? Consumer good brands and retailers are now going through and undergoing huge digital transformations. We've seen brands triple down on personalization spending, really focused on measuring ROI, empowering contextual marketing with behavior and algorithms. And a huge part of this is being able to use data effectively to provide those consumers with really relevant experiences that plays that difference between loyalty and them saying, adios, I will see you later. And at Breinify, our mission from the very beginning was to democratize data science, really making that predictive personalization at scale accessible especially for brands that have a really hard time attracting that data science talent. And we help with brands at different stages of their personalization journey, whether they're just starting out, trying to understand their data strategy, all the way to being able to have fully real-time personalization on their website, email, SMS, app, and giving them this crawl, walk, run mentality where they could be jump-started and propelled into the predictive personalization right at the beginning instead of waiting and building their own. So for us, we've done a really great job of building a really lightweight plug and play AI platform that really helps to connect and collect and optimize consumer journeys and then enable that predictive and dynamic personalization without our brands needing to have their own chief data officer or a team of data scientists in-house. And I think one of the things that we've really zoned in on how to make this achievable is to have a holistic approach to personalization, which is based on metrics and measuring end-to-end results, and something that we believe really heavily in called crawl, walk, run. So taking your existing kind of experiences on your web and turning it from a static experience to a dynamic experience that no longer requires engineers to really support those needs. So you could be quick, you could be streamlined. Then taking that experience and then applying algorithms from our AI so that you're able to get this predictive capabilities and transparency into the system. And so being able to earn that trust to know that the experiences are going to be relevant and scalable. But overall, at the end of the day, those are the areas that we think and how we're approaching democratization of data science. Today, we really focus on these consumer brands, but in the long term, we do plan on expanding into other kind of areas like B2B. We want to open up an API in the future. So new startups who maybe lack their own data science teams can also be able to build on top of really powerful algorithms and data sets. But overall, we've really kind of kept our eye on the ball and focused on how to help brands achieve being able to access and utilize predictive personalization at scale.
And I suspect for most people listening, they're surrounded by predictive personalization without even realizing it. And by that, immediately what springs to mind for me is Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, etc. But these experiences we then take and expect them everywhere. But for people that are hearing about the phrase for the first time, can you just explain exactly what predictive personalization is and how increasingly important these personalized digital experiences are to brands now as well as these expectations increase?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. When you work with the big brands like Amazon and Netflix and these different ones, you get this wonderful experience of the right content without realizing that it's already been kind of personalized for you. You get to go there and it's the right information. And that's a really kind of enlightening and refreshing experience for the consumer. But when you think about the brands that we tend to eat or utilize on a daily basis, think about shampoos and salad dressings and recipes and things like this, it's really hard for them to be able to work with predictive personalization without truly understanding how they can use to power it. And so let's start with the basics. When we think about personalization, it's really about referring to the ability to tailor consumer experiences to preferences of an individual consumer. Now, when we apply the predictive piece to it, it's all about getting ahead of what your individual consumers will be interested in regarding the content, the promotions, the offers, anything that builds that digital experience and making sure that it's cohesive across different journeys. So being able to click on an email newsletter, getting to the website and having that same promotion or that same recipe information being showcased on the web to keep that experience cohesive is all the big difference, and the importance of having really strong digital kind of personalized experiences to keep your consumers engaged and knowing that your goal isn't just to get them back, but to give them something of value and to create that brand loyalty. And so for us, I mean, we're huge believers that the more personalized that experience is, the more likely consumers are to sign up for the CRM, make more purchases, remain loyal to your brand, interact with your content, whether it's articles or tips and inspirations. And those type of things all lead to longer kind of lifetime value of your consumers, which makes your brand entirely just much more valuable and exciting to be at. But of course, when we think about predictive personalization, it's impossible to do this manually at scale. Just with thousands or millions of consumers, curating that experience for each single person just isn't really feasible, no matter how big your marketing and your brand team is. And that's where the right personalization tools come in. It takes time usually to implement a predictive personalization engine, and it takes time to build a robust personalization journey. So for many brands, it's really hard to get those efforts off the ground and into some sort of reality. But at the end of the day, what we always kind of share that we think is important is that it's really critical when you want to start the personalization journey to go and find a partner that believes in this crawl, walk, run to essentially help educate you and know that you don't have to have everything in place to be able to start serving the right experiences. There's been so many brands that we've seen in the past before, like we worked with them, and it always came down to they spent 2 years trying to build that personalization strategy. And by the time they actually want to execute it, the expectations of the consumer has changed. And so how can you start finding the right vendor that allows you to test and iterate quickly with clear metrics, and then utilizing this to be able to bring those experiences that are forward-looking but that's kind of how we like to think and approach for predictive personalization. And definitely these experiences are becoming increasingly more important, especially with the fact that there is a pandemic going on. Many people are doing more kind of online experiences recently, less in person. So at the end of the day, you have to jump on this train now or risk being left behind.
And you kind of hinted a few moments ago that there is a lack of data science talent at some of the biggest consumer-facing brands out there. And I suspect there'll be a lot of business leaders listening around the world nodding in agreement too. But could you just expand on what Temporal AI is and how that could actually allow customer brands to harness the power of data science without the overhead of managing their own data science teams? Because I get the feeling that that's kind of what's holding people back at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, temporal AI is just maybe a fancier data sciencey term around the fact that utilizing time as a major component in understanding upcoming preferences is what we specialize in. So a good example is today we work with Bevmo, which is one of the largest alcohol retailers here in the United States. And often to the preferences of many brands, they think about what did they last purchase? So let's show them more of what they last purchased. But the reality is our preferences tend to change. So if you look at like myself, Diane as a person, I tend to go and purchase red wines and I tend to do them for shipping because I'm more of a planner. I like to make sure that I have what I need ahead of time. But if there happens to be a 3-day weekend or New Year's, for example, then I may actually expand beyond my preferences and purchase bottles of Prosecco or anything that has bubbles in there. And then anytime there's a 3-day weekend and it's hotter than usual, right? Like in San Francisco, that would be like 76 degrees. We're very spoiled here. But whenever it hits that, where it's 5% higher than normal, then I may be interested in, I don't know, purchasing cases of beer to go hang out with my friends, right? And so this example of being able to look ahead is what a temporal AI is really specialized in, and being able to know that like our system can do this at scale across your millions of consumers that's visiting your site, experiencing your CRM, means that you don't have to go and like dictate the preference of each person, but it's allowing the AI to know that today Diane's acting more like her normal purchase behavior, but tomorrow she may perform differently because of some external context or something that has to do with the upcoming timing for her. And so now we have to get ahead of that by showing her the right combination of products, promotions, offers, and deals, all in the same experience. And so this allows a lot of our consumer brands to get the power of this data science that really drives those conversions that they're looking for. But they don't necessarily have to have their own data scientists to train their models, but they do get full transparency to know what is this AI going to recommend for a first-time visitor? What is it going to select for a returning visitor? What's it going to select for a really loyal person? And how do we prevent spamming to that individual person? So they get full visibility into how the AI is thinking and deciding, and they could tweak it, but they don't need to have any sort of engineering background. They can decide that right now, my goal is to drive more conversions. My goal is to drive more sales. Maybe my goal is to drive more of a specific action, for example, bookmarking recipes. And they could define this and allow our AI to go and find those consumer journeys. So you're absolutely right. Like there is a huge lack of data science talent, especially for the brands that don't necessarily sell technologies. They sell the things that we tend to love day in, day out in our normal life, but being able to build their own AI in-house and managing the data is going to be quite difficult. And so having a AI and on top of that, an AI that looks forward versus just using historical context is something that many of our customers appreciate.
And on that same note, how can AI be used to predict a consumer's future interests, needs, or even behavior? What type of data is collected to deliver on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been lots of kind of like recent challenges around just all the different ways of how personalization can be used. But when it comes to predicting kind of what's the upcoming interest in those needs and behaviors, the data that we tend to recommend as a good starting point is starting with what you would consider to be the ideal consumer journey. So if you're on the retail side, it's usually around checkouts and interactions with the product or some sort of content. If you are on the CPG side, it could be around driving your loyalty program, or maybe you've built up a big plethora of like tips and inspiration articles or recipe articles, and you want to utilize that to essentially help those visitors become reachable. So the first type of data that we find to be really relevant is just making sure you have a clear understanding of what is the ideal kind of success metric for you, and taking a step back by not just defining the marketing like definitions of how you want the tool to work, but asking that core function of what is your goal today? Is your goal that you want to drive retention? Is your goal to reduce bounce? But start with that big overarching goal, because there's definitely lots of different ways to solve it. But today, I think for us, we find that at least with our customers, the AI being able to utilize that helps the marketers save a huge amount of time and astronomical and like the amount of resources. And I think the most effective and impressive part is that they're able to catch behavioral patterns that the human eye just can't really see, right? It allows the marketing teams to capture these opportunities that they otherwise would have missed just because of time restraints. So if you think about a marketing team and a brand, they may at most run maybe 15 campaigns a year, a little bit more than one a month. And so when they run these campaigns, it has to be to a fairly large group. So you want to tackle something that might work for 80% or semi-work, right? For 80% of your visitors, just because you don't have the bandwidth to go and say, I want to run a campaign for 2% of my users and 3% of my users here and like 0.5% of my users here. It's just not possible. And so those opportunities tend to get missed because the experiences are just a little bit too one size fits all. So a good example is, I think, especially right now, we're getting into the new year. And a lot of marketing teams spend a lot of time around the New Year's, Christmas, Hanukkah, what we call the holiday season campaigns. But by the time they're done, they end up missing out on a lot of individuals that may celebrate things that are a little bit less well known. So like Chinese New Year and Diwali, and people who enjoy, I don't know, beers and wines from Game of Thrones. And so how can our AI help to identify the opportunities so that you're really getting down and drilling down into that one-on-one experience? But that's a lot of the benefits of when you utilize an AI to help do the predictions around each individual consumer's future interests and needs and behavior versus manually doing it or creating larger, broader segments.
And of course, cybersecurity and privacy are two huge themes right now. So the question I've got to ask is, how do businesses and big brands personalize digital experiences, which is all about collection of consumer data, without compromising privacy and without accidentally drifting into creepy territory?
Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, one thing that I'm a big believer of is data is a privilege and it's not a right. And so consumers are open to sharing data if they can trust how that data will be utilized. So I recently just watched Spider-Man, and I've watched that trailer probably a billion times, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, that trailer itself is an experience that I had to share information around my preferences to know that, hey, Diane likes superhero movies, and that's why she's watching it on these apps, right? But at the end of the day, because I know the value of what I'm getting back is this wonderful kind of video that I get to enjoy, then I don't mind sharing the fact that I enjoy my, superhero movies. So this essential handoff of data and value is really important. And so when we think about cybersecurity and privacy, yes, it's super, super critical. I think at the end of the day, people don't have to give you data, but if they do, you have to make sure you're delivering something of value back. And so that can get the right experience. And so consumers really are opening it if they see that there is a clear improvement to the consumer experience. So for us, cybersecurity and privacy is really critical. And at the end of the day, it should be something on the forefront of every brand's minds.
And just to hammer home the point of everything we've discussed today, in what ways does data science take personalization to the next level, would you say?
Yeah, I think data science right now is probably a very hot topic. It's still a little bit untangible, right, regarding where it's going. And people are really interested in seeing something a little bit more tangible, which we like to say you have to focus on the use cases. And so when we see about the ways that data science is taking personalization to the next level, you can already see that some of the tools in this world, like A/B testing tools, are starting to get replaced. Performance marketers, they face this like challenge where they're asked to create marketing campaigns that appeal to wide and sometimes very different groups of consumers. But on the other hand, those campaigns and efforts has to deliver results. And they're kind of on two different fronts, right? Like if you go broad, the results aren't as good. But if you go more narrow and be more individualized, then you're not appealing to as big as a group as you possibly can. And so in the past year, as the dependency on this digital increased, that single strategy, no matter how refined and researched, like you cannot be optimal to appeal to all of your unique visitors. And so in the past, like A/B testing and split testing was often used to figure out what's the best page for a visitor, and was used to test copywriting and user segments and different potential kind of like user experiences to help quantify the impact of those ideas. But over time, those A/B testing rules were then activated to really help lead visitors down different journeys. And while this type of rule-based personalization is in some ways better than a one-size-fits-all approach, like the marketer is still required to manually set up static rules based off of gut feelings to deliver some experiences to a predefined segment of visitor that doesn't get to switch hats. And so if you think about the example where I like to typically purchase red wines, but sometimes I switch. In this specific scenario with A/B testing, this type of concept puts me into a wine category and that's all I do. And I would never be able to discover new products or new experiences that may drive better brand loyalty over time. So predictive personalization in this scenario, being able to use data science, is taking that to the next level and utilizing machine learning to then present the best experiences as that person interacting with your different channels in real time. And it's able to automatically adjust to change based off of that behavior in a current session or in a longer kind of range of time, and being able to adopt those experiences so you're not just essentially putting someone into a bucket and saying, this is your home now, and like, this is where you stay. But definitely with data science, we're seeing personalization change quite a bit. You're getting faster results and ROI. You're getting better results and better impact for just your brand, and getting to know that like instead of just doing a test and getting a winner, the experience is not necessarily improving, but having data science means that it's adapting and improving in real time. And so you're not really missing out or losing that potential offering in that moment just because you're getting some analytical metrics. And then last but not least, I think it's going to let marketers just become much, much more efficient. They can focus on strategy and really thinking about what's going to make their customers and consumers happy versus shackling them to say, here, set up tests, monitor the experience, decide which winner is like statistically significant. And then like now that the test is kind of done, figure out if there was like issues with the test. Like these are all non-creative tasks. Yeah. And you're essentially having a marketer whose whole goal is to be creative and think about the consumers and what their needs are. And so in this case, I do think data science is really leveling up the personalization game. And it's just a matter of adoption and how many of them are going to be ready to jump on this train immediately, or still follow maybe like a strategy or a plan that they've created from 3 years ago around personalization. Like, are they ready to take the leap?
And I was recently talking about this subject with another guest recently, and he was saying that if you go on Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, everything is all completely personalized for you now to get what you want and when you want it. But he said when you put on anything entertainment-wise, whether it be TV, for example, it's all like almost like going back in time. I mean, Disney Plus, Apple TV, etc. They don't know what you like and what you don't like, and you have to scroll endlessly. In fact, for most part of the time, it seems to take longer to find something to watch than actually select something to watch. But I'm curious, where do you see the future of predictive personalization in 5 to 10 years from now, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's going to become a norm, right? Like You're going to get there. Your journeys are going to be much shorter. but your frequency to come back will be much higher. I think from a few trends of what's coming up in the next 5 years, I do think that a lot of the data science pieces will start to become a little bit more prescriptive. I think today, when you think about that experience that you just shared on Facebook, it's really taking the concepts of like, what have you been interested in? Now let's show you more of that. But I think over time, it's going to become, especially in digital marketing, like I think companies like us and having our AI recommend the use cases around these trend preventions and checkout conversions and all these things. Part of that predictive personalization trend across the marketers is that there's a building interest in getting recommendations on like what to try, especially if there's like many potential outcomes and experiences to test out and experience. So I do think that's one of the trends that will be coming up is how can the AI start to become more prescriptive to let you know, here's the top 3 things you should try versus here is the best experience. And we're just putting them down that path. But over time, educating the marketer so that they spend less time to gather the right information to make decisions. And then I think another trend over the next 10 years, which I actually thought was going to come sooner, but I've been finding that it's coming a little bit later, is the use of external data. So there's definitely a lot of like different brands that are there to sell different external data sets, whether it's localized weather or events or when the next sports game is. And I had thought that this trend was going to be upon us just like in the next year or so, where if you look at like our daily lives, we notice that like weather of the day or these upcoming sports game really affect our moods and preferences. I would have predicted that the usage of these external data points would have been a more critical part for contextual marketing, but just the adoption of these data sets has been pretty low so far, just because I think being able to extract the meaning of how these type of events in relation to user behavior and what their upcoming interests are is still pretty rudimentary. Just because you have weather data doesn't necessarily mean like what hot and cold is for Diane, right? Like that it's hot but how is that hot for someone else that's standing next to you? I think many brands are starting to be early in their personalization journey, especially with predictive capabilities, and they'll have to be a lot more comfortable with these tools before these additional data points are going to be introduced. But I do think that's going to be a bigger topic in the next 5 to 10 years, whereas something that's going to be a little bit more quick to come is that prescribing of the next use cases and having data science be more prescriptive.
I've loved chatting with you today. I learned so much. But before I let you go, I want to have a little bit of fun with you now, because a question I always like to ask my guests is if there was a particular song that has inspired them in the past, helped them in their career, or just helps them get their head in the zone before going on stage or a big meeting. So what would your song be and why? And we'll add it to our Spotify plus.
So I am a huge fan of the movie The Greatest Showman. Yes. So my song is probably the one that says, "This is me," or I don't know, maybe like A Million Dreams, but one of those two are songs that I just have to get in the zone before any big meeting. So it pumps me up and I feel like this is it. Like this is the moment. You're in it or you're not.
Absolutely love that. I'll get on that on our Spotify playlist. But before I let you go, for anyone wanting to find out more information about anything we've talked about today, we have covered a lot in just 30 minutes. So anyone that wants to find out more information or contact your team, what's the best starting point?
Yeah, so you can always reach out to me directly at Diane@Breinify.ai, or you can come find us on our website at Breinify.ai or LinkedIn and reach out to our team. We'd love to get your feedback on what your thoughts are regarding future trends. And we're more than open to kind of share a little bit more about what we do and see how we can help move this predictive personalization movement forward. But at the end of the day, the best 2 places are either email, our website, or please follow us on our social, whether it's our LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook.
I think we've only just scratched the surface on personalization today, so it'd be great to get you back on later in the year. Maybe talk about the role of serendipity and how you can still discover things that you might not normally listen to or watch or even buy too. But there's a subject for another day. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to come on, share your insights and your personal story too. So thank you.
Thanks, Neil. This was great. Let me know if you guys have any more questions, and I'm more than happy to come back in the future and see whether my future predictions are coming true or if some of those thoughts around serendipity has changed.
So a huge thank you to Diane for coming on the podcast today, enlightening me on the worlds of temporal AI and how AI is used to predict a consumer's future interests, needs, behaviours, and how they personalise digital experiences. And how it's all about the collection of consumer data, but without compromising privacy and without getting creepy. So I will be inviting Diane back onto the podcast later in the year because I want to explore the worlds of serendipity in personalisation too, because I think sometimes we all want to read, listen or watch something that completely challenges our usual tastes. And I'd love to know a little bit more about how data science and predictive personalisation can allow for that. And anyone that's seen Spotify Unwrapped at the end of the year and had a listen, there are some guilty pleasures, shall we say, that shock people when they share their list and think, this is not how I present my musical taste. So I'd be interested in how predictive personalisation can allow for that and also enable us to discover things that are outside of our usual comfort zone. But that is a topic for another day. But as always, let me know your thoughts. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you'd like to work with me, and that can be around ghostwriting your business blogs, CEO blogs, or help you launch your own podcast and leave all the editing and heavy lifting to me while you just have a little chat on a Zoom call. Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts. And I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So a big thank you for listening, as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.